Today, we're not just talking about a singer. We're decoding a system. We're going to peel back the layers on those powerhouse vocals and all the record-breaking sales to really understand the strategy behind one of the most incredible success stories in modern music. It's a story that all started with a choice made at a moment of crisis, a philosophy that turned personal pain into a global movement. This is the Adele Principle, vulnerability that builds armies. Let's dive in. So picture this. It's 2011. Adele is facing massive pressure to fit into the pop mold, and on top of that, she's recovering from a vocal hemorrhage. I mean, for a singer, that is the absolute worst case scenario. The very thing that makes her who she is, her voice, is just silent. And while she's quiet, the pop machine is turning out auto-tuned hits and flashy videos. The pressure on her was just immense. Her career wasn't just at a fork in the road, it was basically hanging by a thread. I'm right there, in that moment of complete silence. That's where her real story begins. You see, her defining moment wasn't some huge comeback performance. It wasn't hitting a perfect high note. No, it was a choice. It was this defiant, stubborn refusal to back down, to compromise on the raw, messy, and emotionally painful song she was writing. The industry wanted a fantasy, but she decided to dig even deeper into her own brutal, honest reality. And that single act of rebellion, it became the foundation for everything that followed. So this brings us to the big question we're going to unpack today. You have this entire multi-billion-dollar industry that's built for one thing: polished, predictable perfection. So why on earth would you choose the exact opposite? Why choose pain? Why choose messy, unfiltered honesty? I mean, it seems completely backwards, right? Almost like a career-ending move. But what we're about to see is that this wasn't just some emotional whim. This was a strategy, a calculated choice. This was the birth of a principle that would not only save her career, but completely rewrite the rules for everyone else. Okay, so here's our game plan for breaking down the Adele Principle. We're gonna start with that key moment, her defiant refusal. Then we'll dig into where that came from by looking at how she was rejecting the pop machine from day one. After that, we'll define the big idea itself, vulnerability that builds armies. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts, her emotional honesty system. We'll zoom out to see how all this created a new global standard. And we'll wrap it all up with the big lesson for all of us, that your truth is your power. All right, let's jump into section 1, a defiant refusal. To really get a handle on Adele's impact, you have to go back to that moment, because this wasn't just her saying no. This was the very beginning of a new philosophy, a whole way of operating that would guide every single decision she made from then on. And this right here, this is the heart of it. The Adele Principle was born from one single, powerful realization. In a world obsessed with being perfect, her biggest competitive advantage wasn't going to be a slick music video or a fancy dance routine. It was the very thing that most people try to hide. It was the raw, unfiltered, and systematic sharing of her personal pain. She figured out that by making her own struggles incredibly specific and totally visible, she could build a connection with her audience that no marketing budget could ever buy. This was the moment she realized her vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was her secret weapon. So where did this intense conviction even come from? It didn't just pop up out of nowhere in 2011. Nope, it was forged in her reality, shaped by the world she grew up in. If you really want to understand why she rejected the pop machine, you have to understand the world that made her. And this is just so key to her whole mindset. Her background isn't just a nice little backstory, it was her filter for the world. You know, being raised by a single mom in Tottenham, dealing with money struggles, it gave her this fiercely grounded sense of what was real and what wasn't. She basically had a built-in BS detector for the shiny, fake world of celebrity because she was never part of it. And because she was an outsider, she saw the system for what it was. And in that moment of clarity, she realized that her own messy, complicated, and often painful life, the stuff the industry wanted to airbrush away, that was her most unique and powerful asset. This chart just lays it out perfectly. It was a total clash of two systems. On one hand, you have the pop machine's rules. Create a fake image, cover everything in heavy production, and for goodness sake, just fit the current trend. Adele's rules were a direct rejection of that entire playbook. They wanted a manufactured image, she gave them unfiltered honesty. They wanted a heavily produced sound, she gave them raw vocal power. And where they told her to follow the trend, she decided to become the new standard. This wasn't just her being rebellious. It was a strategic takedown of a system she knew she never truly belonged to anyway. Okay, so she tossed out the old rulebook, but she had to replace it with something. And that brings us to Section 3, vulnerability that builds armies. This is where we really get into the core philosophy. We've been throwing this phrase around, but what does it actually mean as a strategy? Let's define it. And there it is, the Adele Principle. At its heart is a systematic belief. It's not a mood, not a vibe, it's a core business strategy. It's this radical idea that pure, raw authenticity is the single most valuable thing in the world of entertainment. And the way you deliver that authenticity is through personal pain. Not as a diary entry you keep to yourself, but as a universal emotional pipeline. It's this incredible idea that the more deeply personal and specific your own truth is, the more everyone else will understand it. But how does a big idea like this actually work day to day? Well, it's built on 3 core pillars, 3 rules that make the whole thing real and repeatable. The first is the Specificity-to-Universality Mandate. The second is the Anti-Artifice Protocol. And the third is the Relatability Contract. So let's break each of these down. So the first pillar is this beautiful paradox, the Specificity-to-Universality Mandate. Just think about her lyrics for a second. She doesn't just sing about being sad after a breakup, no. She gives you these incredibly specific, almost photographic details like, I remember you said sometimes it lasts in love, but sometimes it hurts instead. By being so specific about her pain, she creates this emotional space for us, the listeners, to pour our own memories and our own heartbreaks into her songs. Her story becomes a container for our story. It's genius, really. The more specific she gets, the more universal the music feels. The second pillar is the Anti-Artifice Protocol. Think of this as the delivery system for all that emotion. The modern music industry has this whole arsenal of tricks to make a vocal sound perfect. Auto-tune, layering, all kinds of digital effects. Adele's protocol is to basically reject all of that. Her instrument is her voice, and she presents it as a raw, unfiltered vessel. You hear the little cracks, you hear her taking a breath, you hear the raw power. Those aren't mistakes, they're proof that it's real. They're a signal to all of us that the emotion hasn't been sanitized by a machine and that we can trust it. And this final pillar, the Relatability Contract, is what holds the whole thing together. The honesty in her music only works if we believe the person singing it is actually honest. So she very consciously presents herself not as some untouchable superstar, but as a flawed, funny, and refreshingly normal person. That loud, cackling laugh, her super candid interviews, that's not just her personality, it's a strategy. It's like an unspoken promise to her audience that says, hey, the person you see cracking jokes is the same one who felt that heartbreak. You can trust this. It's brand protection for her entire philosophy of being real. Okay, so now we get the philosophy. We have the what and the why. But a philosophy without a system is really just a nice idea. So that brings us to section 4, the emotional honesty system. This is where we look at the how, the actual repeatable processes she uses to turn all that raw, chaotic emotion into these perfectly crafted anthems that connect with millions. This is so fascinating because it shows you the incredible discipline that's hiding behind the raw emotion. This is her main system, the Emotional Excavation Protocol, and it's a very deliberate 4-step process. It starts with just experiencing real, messy, chaotic emotion, but she doesn't just let it wash over her. Step 2 is a rigorous journaling process to document all those feelings. Then, step 3 is to excavate, to sift through all those journal entries and find the most powerful, specific lines and feelings. And finally, she organizes that chaos into lyrics. It's a repeatable method for turning a personal mess into a public masterpiece. She literally has a system for manufacturing honesty. So if the first system is about digging up the honest emotion, this second habit is all about protecting it. It's the creative purity habit, and it's designed to make sure all that raw emotion doesn't get watered down by the industry. It works in 3 key ways. First, creative isolation. She works in small, intimate studios far away from big label influence. Second, minimal collaboration. She deliberately limits the number of people who can come in and change her original vision. And finally, production simplification. By keeping the music simple, usually just piano, guitar, and strings, she's enforcing that anti-artifice protocol. This whole habit is like a firewall, making sure the final song is pure and focused on one thing, her voice and her story. Now, what happens when you take this principle and these systems and you apply them with total discipline for over a decade? Well, you don't just have a few hit songs. You actually cause this massive shift in the entire culture. And that brings us to section 5, a new global standard, where we look at how Adele didn't just climb the charts, she completely changed the game. I mean, this side-by-side just says it all. Before Adele, the pop world really valued certain things. Image was everything. Production was used to hide any flaws and create this illusion of perfection. And really, the goal was just escapism. After Adele, those values were completely flipped on their head. Authenticity became the new gold standard. Raw vocal power, flaws and all, was celebrated because it revealed truth. And the goal of music itself shifted. Suddenly, there was room for deep, powerful empathy right alongside the party anthems. She didn't just join the conversation, she changed the language completely. And this is the most important thing to understand about her legacy. It's not just the insane sales numbers or the shelves full of Grammys. Her real, lasting legacy is that she proved it could be done. She proved on a global scale that no one can deny that raw, uncompromised, emotional honesty isn't a risk. It's the single most powerful way to build both die-hard cultural loyalty and massive commercial success. She showed an entire industry that vulnerability isn't a weakness you have to hide. It's a superpower you can use. Which brings us to our final and maybe most important section, your truth is power. After looking at her entire system, the question really becomes, what does this all mean for us? How can we take the core ideas of the Adele Principle and apply them to our own lives, outside of the music world? The blueprint is actually pretty simple, but it is incredibly powerful. First, treat your personal truth, your unique story, your struggles, your flaws, as your greatest asset, not something you need to cover up. Second, just make the conscious decision to shed that armor of perfection. As Adele proved, being real is the ultimate source of connection and power. And third, create your own version of her emotional excavation protocol. Find a disciplined way, whether it's journaling or just talking it out, to turn your own messy emotional experiences into organized, actionable fuel for your work, your art, or just your life. So in the end, what Adele really showed us is that the deepest sadness can create the strongest connection. The Adele Principle gave us a systematic blueprint for how vulnerability can build armies, turning one person's pain into a source of collective strength. And it all comes down to this one simple rule that applies to every single one of us, whether we're on a global stage or not. Your greatest connection is always found in your greatest truth.